Our guest for today is Chef Myke Tatung. Our subject is dining in the new normal. Hi, Mike. Hi, Chef Myke.
Hello, hi Jiggy. Kumusta?
Last time
Oh,
we saw each other, it was worlds ago. It was a
yeah,
culinary event organized by the hotels and restaurants in
yeah,
Cebu. I remember you were launching a book back then. What was the
yeah,
book again?
yeah. Discarte. Actually, it was a certified bestseller, so it turned out pretty well. And I'm
Congratulations.
releasing
Congratulations.
I'm releasing another book this year. Even with the pandemic, I still have a new book coming out.
Can you give us a clue what it is? You have any idea? Maybe you can give us
It's
an idea.
it's 101 of my favorite recipes, and it's tied up with my cooking channel, Simple, on YouTube and Facebook. Yeah,
Wow. Okay, our subject for today, Mike, is dining in the new normal. As you well
yeah,
know, Mike, people will never look at eating out the same way again.
mm,
A restaurant could be a potential breeding ground for a virus. They're afraid to get sick, even if there is already a vaccine. We don't want to make the same mistakes that we did and not heed the call of people like Bill Gates, who saw this happening 5 years ago and said that it's not going to be weapons of mass
yeah,
destruction that will ruin us. It'll be a virus. And true enough, 5 years after, here we are in that pandemic that he talked about, and this will not be the first, obviously, and this won't be the last.
yeah,
And of course, people will look at the eating out, they'll never look at the
mm,
same way again, and a relationship with food, and also the food chain supply will probably be
mm,
changed
mm,
forever. So, Mike,
yeah.
knowing all of this, what is
Mm.
your best case scenario and worst case scenario for the dining industry? Go ahead, chef.
For one, I'm very positive with how it might turn out. Though we're struggling right now, but I think that we're quite a resilient lot, and I think we love eating out, and we will gravitate towards eating out. No, there have been pandemics before, and always humanity has been able to bounce back. And I think in this case, it's just intensified by the fact that we're more alarmed because of social media and a lot of the politics behind the pandemic also. But I think looking beyond that, I think the restaurant industry will bounce back in whatever form. It may not be in the same mold as it is today, but it's going to survive. Restaurateurs, being in the restaurant business, you really have to be highly creative. You have to be you have to be very competitive. You have to be highly professional. You have to be very driven. And I think these qualities are what will push the restaurant and the F&B industry forward with this pandemic. So best case scenarios in a few years, in a few months maybe, um, it's going to get back to normal, perhaps in a different kind of normal. We will have the same volume of people dining out in a different format, in a different kind of experience, but surely it's business as usual. And in Manila, we see a lot of restaurants that have begun to open up right now, and there are quite some diners. People are gaining back the confidence to eating out with all the safety features put in place. But Jigs, we seem to overlook the fact that also that in the F&B world, the standards that are required of the COVID situation are standards that should have been put in place even without a
Before,
pandemic. So
exactly.
what is happening right now while we try to educate a lot of people on food safety and all these things, it seems like now it's being fast tracked because people especially people now who just think pwede na
Absolutely.
wala mo yung problema may nasakitan na and all that, diba? I think they're beginning to realize that when your enemy is something that cannot be seen, is invisible, like bacteria or a virus and all that, you can't be irresponsible. You just can say, o man hugaw, nahug, trapuhi lang na, or di ba? So I think this is the opportune time for the F&B industry to, uh, you know, push forward culinary education, proper culinary education, proper food safety, wherein all these guidelines, all these standards have already been there even before this pandemic. So um parang parang it's just the COVID situation is just a rude awakening for all the restaurants to, hey, do your job properly and all that. And the next thing that we have to deal with is actually the diner's attitude, how willing are they to dine out again? Are they comfortable? Do they trust the establishments enough? So that's where the unique dynamic comes in, especially for restaurants with strong brands, with strong trust levels, will surely be able to get its customers right back. But for restaurants which have like shady reputations, or you're doubtful on how they run their kitchen. So these restaurants will probably have a more difficult time trying to convince people to dine in their establishments again.
So the metrics of what a good restaurant is will probably change, right?
Yes, true,
So
true.
what do you think? What do you think? Because I think one of the reasons why people were dining out pre-pandemic was that we were all so busy with our lives, busy working. It's
Mm,
difficult to get helpers these days to help you cook your meals. So people had no
mm,
choice but
mm,
to eat out. Now, in this new normal, maybe a fraction, if not a huge majority of the workforce will probably be working at home,
mm.
and all that
Yes.
stuff. So, what do you think will the new metrics be for what a good restaurant ought to be? Do you have any ideas?
For one, there are different kinds of categories of restaurants. Definitely, like for a restaurant, Talisa, which is a bit on the fine dining side. It's still about the experience. So you really have to have something special for people to dine out and pay a premium for that experience. But for the more fast casual and the mid-range restaurants, I think there should be a lot of innovation in terms of packaging, how the food is delivered, how the food is served, and all that, for people to be able to, trust your brand again. And I think one other problem also with what the pandemic has brought is that on the issue of food security, especially for like Cebu City, we rely a lot on the outside islands or imported stuff for a lot of our produce and a lot of our food stuff. And even in Manila, if the supplies were cut off, everybody would have been starving in the first month, because we're highly dependent on import. So right now, the need to support local agriculture, the need to find local sources becomes a more important and pressing issue, that um, that not only the restaurateur should look into, but government as well. It's really that food chain and the value chain to ensure that, there are restaurants, if you can get your supplies, what are you gonna serve? And if you're highly dependent, because the scare right now is not just about not being able to cook the food. What if we have nothing to cook because nothing's arriving? Because it's not only the Philippines, it's not only Cebu that's affected by this situation. Even the countries that where we source our raw mats from are affected. So what happens if the global food chain is disrupted and the value chain is disrupted? And what if all of a sudden we get to have access to the rice of Vietnam, or Thailand? We're gonna starve. I don't think that Filipinos would change to having mashed potatoes on a daily basis, because rice would be too expensive. So there's so many disruptions around. But I think that still the same. I think that um, we are uh, culture of resilience. We're a culture of entrepreneurs probably that will be able to find solutions, but sometimes the solutions will have to be very much different from how we anticipated it because of the problems this is causing globally.
So that's your best case scenario. Paint to
Best
us
case
what
scenario.
you're most afraid of. What is your worst case scenario in for the dining industry?
It's very one of the worst things that could happen is that the entire dining industry is really going to collapse, especially when you speak of um, restaurants or establishments that are dependent on the tourism industry, especially now that travel will be restricted for some time, or even if it was people were allowed to travel. I think the airlines and all that have to up their prices to to kind of balance off their losses for the pandemic. So it's going to be a really difficult climb, and the worry right now is that if the people in the industry really lose hope, and they just throw in the towel and say, "No, I've have had enough of this, and I'd rather be doing something else. No, I'd rather go into um, more low risk stuff, or because there's a need in agriculture, all our restaurateurs will say, I'll just farm, I'll just plant kamote, or I'll plant rice and all that. So yeah, it's a good thing, but it's a long term shift of of a lot of things. So for now, immediately, what needs to be augmented are the livelihoods of the people in the F&B. Like so many percent, like there are like 500,000 families in Metro Manila who are dependent on the F&B. And right now, the chains comprise around 20%. All the rest are small and medium scale, food companies. And these are the companies that are really badly hit by the pandemic. So these are the people with less capital, less expertise, less access to financing and all that. So if all this, if the government doesn't step in, if big business like the malls, don't give like support on the leases, everything's gonna crumble. But I don't think they're going to allow that to happen right away. They may like hold you in your neck just to get back every penny they're spending. But um yeah, that's the worst case is that extreme recession and people lose hope, and especially for an island like Cebu, which is highly dependent on tourism, that's going to be such a big disaster. And
You know,
if
the buzzword now is I don't know if you hear this a lot. I certainly hear it a lot in the dining and beverage, food and beverage corners. Is the buzzword is cloud kitchen? What are your thoughts on a cloud kitchen?
The cloud kitchen is something that has been evolving for the past few years, and it's very sensible. It's very sensible. But the way I see it is that the people who will benefit the most of this cloud kitchen setup are those with enough capital to set up one. Because it's very expensive. If you put up a cloud kitchen, you mean it's like a commissary, so you have a central commissary that does all your food. And because of the food safety standards that have to be adhered to, you can just make like a dirty kitchen at the back of your house and say, "Oh, I'm producing food." If you go by the regulations right now for food safety, it really has to reach a certain standard, and to be able to deliver on that standard, it means that you have to have the right equipment, the right setup, the right design, and that's quite expensive. So actually, for the food industry right now, it's going to be a rich man's game. So it's the people with the biggest capital who will be able to, you know, um, wait for long returns, will be able to win because it's really large scale manufacturing. Who will suffer right now are the smaller food businesses, the people who operate from home, artisan producers, and the like. So it's gonna have a shift to from like in the past few years, there's been explosion of so much creativity. Like anybody was going to be a chef, anybody was doing all this sort of innovations. I think in the near future there will be more creativity in terms of innovating the business model, but less innovation in product. So
You
it
know,
will be business innovation, creativity in packaging, creativity in how finances are run, how food distribution is done, how storage is done. But in terms of innovation, in terms of culinary arts, I think that will have to take a back seat for now.
it's funny that you mentioned that. This will be a rich
Mm,
man's game, moving
mm,
forward, because in Cebu there's so many uh, people that are getting into the food industry in their homes. Baking
mm,
stuff, cooking
mm,
stuff, experimenting stuff, and we've
mm,
had several food
mm,
communities that have erupted and have exploded
mm,
in the past
mm.
3 months that
Yeah.
people have been
Mm, yeah.
ordering from. Those people
Mm,
just making lumpia
yeah.
at home, and people making this and that at home,
Yeah.
and then they just use
Yeah.
Lala Move or Grab to have that food item delivered. So
Yeah.
there's actually a sort of like a
Yeah.
mini explosion of those moms and pops
Yeah.
restaurants, or
Yeah.
not necessarily restaurants, but just making of little
Uh,
stuff. What are your thoughts on that?
yeah. But that's very tricky because people who start off like entrepreneurs, a lot of them will lose money in the next few months or will decide not to do it. Why? Number one, because they're not set up to be a commercial kitchen. They will soon be overwhelmed if they continue operations and do not invest in a real kitchen, industrial kitchen. That's number one. Number Number two, a lot of people ordering and eating food from small time producers because it was, well, Cebu is still ECQ, right? So but after that, when Cebu goes back to normal, there will be now a drop in sales from home-based operations because people now will be in transit and they will now rely again back to the fast food chains. They will now rely on the cafeterias that are around the workplace, and they won't be ordering this kind of stuff because they won't be eating with their families, so they won't look for fancy stuff anymore. They'll be eating by themselves.
Mhm.
And thirdly, with the requirement of BIR to wanting all these small entrepreneurs to register, I think in the first, by that hurdle alone, I think 50% will already you know drop off and decide not to do it. It's
You
just
know,
allow that. Mm,
go ahead,
yeah,
continue.
go ahead, G.
You
I think
mentioned
like mm,
you mentioned a few minutes ago that this is not the first time that we've experienced a pandemic. At least the planet, some parts of Asia
mm,
have already experienced a pandemic, SARS,
mm,
H1N1, and
mm,
all that stuff.
mm,
And one of the palpable changes that we see in the streets of Hong Kong, for example, is that they totally and completely eliminated those carinderia types, those cart
mm,
operations.
yeah,
And I think
yeah,
they've
mm,
upped their game when it comes to the cleanliness of the food that
yeah,
they serve, not
yeah.
only to the locals, but mostly,
Mm,
more importantly, to the tourists.
mm.
What clear changes do you see happening in the food and bev industry here in the Philippines, Mike?
I think there will be a lot of changes in terms of the products that will resonate, that people resonate with. I think there will be less of the gimmicky stuff that are gonna make it. I also think that um, you know there will be more regulation because um, uh, the government sees the potential of these businesses, and there will also be like people who will lobby big chains or big who will also lobby against the small entrepreneurs. So there are a lot of stuff. It's really a complicated game. So for the small players right now, it's really a question of, are you really in it for the long term? Are you really intending to grow this business? Because if you're just doing your leche flan, if you're just doing like your ube pandesal, if you're just doing your, small like cookies and all that, it won't be enough for you to sustain your own livelihood. You earn a little, you get it. Naman po yung kikita gamay, but you're not actually paying for your electricity, you're not costing out your electricity, you're not costing out your rent, because it's just an add-on to your business. But once that business transforms into a real operations, all these dynamics, all these cost structures will change, and you're gonna ask yourself, kaya ba ko kabayad sa akong beko aning akong ginabuhat nga cookies, di ba? Kaya kakabayad ka ko sa akong abang ani nga akong gibuhat. When you lose your job, you used to work in a bank and you're doing this in the meantime because but you're still receiving your salary. But when all your main income is lost and you just earn from this small operation, will it be enough? So I don't think that people will risk that much to replace the traditional sources of livelihood to earning from this small time.
You know what, Mike? Cebu City is a city of entrepreneurs. The whole island of Cebu is a city of entrepreneurs. And a lot of these entrepreneurs are in the food industry. What is your message? Because you've been in the food industry for quite a long time and you've been operating in Manila. You have a series of restaurants in Manila. What is your message to all of our entrepreneurs here in Cebu, the entire island of Cebu, who are in the food industry? Maybe you can give them a message. Go ahead, Mike.
I think first and foremost, you really have to make it very clear in your mind that you really want to be in this industry, and you have to acknowledge all the possible trials that you're gonna face. No? Sometimes it sounds so good. We always talk about the success stories, but all the people who have succeeded so far have failed so many times. And I think you also need a lot of creativity. That's very important. But the problem with creativity is that there's also no protection for people who are creative. And the next day, you know that somebody else is copying what you're doing. So I think aside from that, I've been telling my friends that it's worth to copyright, it's worth to register your trademark. It's it's really worth to protect your brand, even if you don't have a brand in the sense that something that's known. But once you're building it, you already have to make sure that you protect it at the onset, because sometimes in the future, once it's working, a lot of people will be just copying what you're doing, and you're gonna have a heartbreak saying na, oh, ako may nakauna, gikopya mo na sila yung mga kuan. Pero that's the game. So that also, and be ready to lose a lot of money at the start. No one gets into business and makes money and becomes a millionaire straight ahead. So you go into a lot of problems, you have challenges, and I just read somewhere that once you build a company, always have it in your mind that you want it to survive for 101 years. So in your mind, you never create a company, I want to do it for 10 years, I want to do it for 15 years. You really have to have that in your mind. I want to create a brand, I want to create a business that will survive 101 years. So you have to be able, so if you have that mindset for the long term, you will be able to go through any hurdle and transform. Because if you think of 100 years, that's around 4 generations ahead of you. And you know that every generation, culture changes, business changes, economics change. Even you will not be the same person in 100 years. But if you create a business with a culture that can withstand 100 years of change, you probably will have the best chance of surviving in the next few years, because you have that in your mind that the challenge running ka ng kaya ni na akong malampasan, because 100 years ko. So kani 5 years pa ko, 10 years pa ko, 15 years pa ko. Diba? So I think it's really about having the right attitude and also doing your homework. Getting the legal stuff ready, having a good business plan, being sure you have the capital. So all the basics, and also that right, entrepreneurial spirit. Yun lang.
Yeah. Okay, thank you so much, Mike, for giving us some of your
time.
Mike, if they want to know more about what's going on with Chef Tatung, why don't you share to us your social media touch points? Go ahead, Mike.
So you can follow me on my social media accounts. I have Lutong Simple on YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, and TikTok. My TikTok.
Really?
So yeah, we just started a TikTok, so it's just a week old. So let's see how it goes.
TikTok.
Yeah.
And when will I see you back here in Cebu, Mike?
Ah, when all this is over and I'm free to travel there.
Maybe you
Yeah,
can go back to Talisay and you know, bring some stuff for your
yeah,
restaurant, perhaps.
yeah.
So your new restaurant, does it have an official Facebook page? Maybe people may want to check that.
Yeah,
Check it.
it's just Talisay. I have one. It's Talisay, the Garden Cafe. It's in Maginhawa Street in Quezon City. It's not quite a nice place, nice garden. It's a 1960s house, and we serve like more like Filipino Spanish food. And I have another restaurant also in Tomas Morato. Um, it's called Pandan Asian Cafe, and we serve Southeast Asian cuisine. Yun. So if you have time, when all this is over, please visit us. We're not yet open yet again, but we'll be open like in 2 weeks' time. Yeah.
Do you think you'll ever open a restaurant here in Cebu, Mike?
I don't know. I don't know. I think Cebu has a very good selection of restaurants already. So I
Okay.
don't think that putting one there will make it any more special. Yeah.
Very diplomatic of you. Thank you so much, Mike.
Thank you.
Stay safe, Mike, and I hope to catch you again. Maybe we can talk some more one of these days in your
Yeah.
restaurants.
Yeah, sure.
Thank you, Mike. You take care. Stay safe. Bye-bye.